Schulman. What a great name, Neve, right? He created this MTV show called Catfish. Have you ever heard of it? Okay, of course not. This was 2010. But at the time, the internet and social media were really catching steam. And a lot of my friends at the time, back in 2010, were dating. And we, you know what I mean? Like we were talking online and all that kind of stuff. And you might know the term catfish to simply mean something like internet imposter, right? Like that's loosely the definition. But it's actually deeper than that. I don't know if you know where the term catfish actually comes from, but it's actually an old fishing term. It was used by cod fishermen. These guys would be catching massive amounts of cod commercially, but they would introduce just a few catfish into the holding tanks with these thousands and thousands of cod. The catfish acted sort of as an agitator in the tank of cod because they were different and they kind of kept the cod excited, thus preventing the meat of the cod from going mushy while they were being transported. The catfish are not cod, though. They were in there like a troll, like an internet troll, messing around, keeping things interesting, but not who you thought they were. Like they're an agitator, right? In the show, Catfish, people would be in just full-on relationships with somebody like for years and years online, talking and chatting, sometimes even having phone calls, but having never met in real life, only to discover that the person that they had been building this relationship and this bond with is not really the person that they thought they were building this relationship and bond with the entire time. The whole thing was a lie. They weren't really a cod, they were a catfish. So that's where the term comes from. Like, you know what I'm talking about? The show would be like this. Sometimes you're dating this, let's just say a girl named Jessica, Southern Belle. There's pictures of her everywhere, deep profile, a lot of friends, a lot of engagement. You're like, surely that's a real person and all that stuff until you meet in real life and you find out that Jessica is not actually the same age as you. It's actually a 56-year-old dude named Frank who lives in his mom's basement. And you're like, oh, shoot. But I still love you, I think, but I can't get past it. And you're just stuck with this weird, like, was it all a lie? And it's like some of it was, but some of it, the feelings were real. Like some of it was true. Like, what do we do with that, you know? And it was always just so fascinating to watch. The show is so addictive. Would the person act differently, though, if they knew all along that Jessica wasn't really who Jessica said she was? Like, of course, right? Of course, if you knew it was Frank the whole time, like you never would have gotten that far. But it's interesting because you still fell in love with that person. It's an interesting thought. Like maybe knowing who someone really is or what they look like, these dynamics are preventing us from getting to know people that we might actually really enjoy. How superficial is it? Would the cod act differently in the tank if they knew these catfish were just in there to mess around? Totally. They'd be like, you're a punk, bro. I'm just going to chill and let my flesh get mushy. Like, obviously. Would we act different if we realized we are being catfished all the time? All over the place. There are these agitators. There are these things in our lives just to keep life exciting or to keep us moving arbitrarily, sometimes just wasting time and energy only to find out that the thing is really a lie. Like it's not actually beneficial. It's not actually helpful. It's not actually healthy, but it's masked and disguised as something that is. This is artificial. And we base our identity around these things, which is sort of what this series is kind of all about, because we don't want it to be based in a lie. We don't want to be catfished to a degree. We want our identity to be based in truth and reality. But we start to believe these things, like I mentioned earlier. These are the things that are out to catfish us, to tell us what our identity is, that you are what you have. You are what you do. Your identity is rooted in those things. You are what people say about you, right? Because when people say something about you so much, you start to believe it, you know? And it starts to become your identity, even though it's a lie. Like at the root and at the core, it's not true. That's those things that you do and the things that you have and what people say about you, they're not who you are. So we struggle with this foundation of absolute truth, which, spoiler alert, is only found in God and what he says about us. If you have your Bible or the Bible app, we're going to be in the book of John. You can go flip there now, chapter 8. And the New Testament is divided into these, there's the first 4 books are known as the Gospels, which really just means good news. And it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I like John because it is like over 90% unique to the other Gospels. And it's my favorite one. It's called the Gospel of Belief because that's why John wrote it, so that we would believe. And he wrote this, and in the 8th chapter, he describes this interaction that Jesus had with some people that expressed faith in him. And he says this in John chapter 8, verse 31. He says to the Jews who believed in Jesus, "If you keep and obey my word, then you are my followers for sure. You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Now, you have to understand, he said to the Jews who believed. There are these people who had this traditional Jewish law that they were following at the time, and Jesus kind of came and said, look, it's kind of not all about these rules and regulations. It's actually about a relationship with me. I am the Son of God, which is crazy for a guy walking around in real life to say that, because he hadn't even proven it fully yet. He hadn't died and resurrected or anything yet. He was still just walking around in the flesh. So a lot of people thought that was insane. But there were some people who believed him. They'd seen his miracles. They had been convinced enough to say, you are the Son of God. You are God himself in human form. I'm going to follow you. They didn't know that they were being kind of catfished all along, that they were subscribed to this law and this way of living that they thought would bring them righteousness, but it had become their identity. They were like, by what I do, that's what makes me good in the eyes of God. So much so that they say this in the next verse. They said to Jesus, this is their response. They said to Jesus, "We're children of Abraham. We come from this blessed lineage of Israel and stuff like that. We've never been servants to anyone." Because Jesus said, the truth will make you free. They're like, free from what? What do you mean when you say you're going to be free? We're not slaves. We're not in bondage to anyone. We already are free under the law. Jesus is like, you don't get it. Y'all are like some cod swimming around. They've essentially been catfish. They're like, we're good. We don't have a problem. And this is what happens to us all the time. I'm good. I don't have a problem, right? We can argue about our freedom while we're living in a lie. Years later, the Apostle Paul, this is after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and the Apostle Paul, who was, he convicted Christians, and now he was a converted Christian. And he's urging these people, and he's urging us now as we read this text to live in not lies, but in truth. And he says this in Colossians 3, "Don't lie to each other, for you guys have stripped off your old sinful nature and all of its wicked deeds." We celebrated baptism last Sunday, and that's the symbolism there, right? It's like the old me is gone. It's been washed away. It's been put to death. He says you've taken it off. It's like old clothes that you've been wearing around. It's like y'all took that off. You don't live there anymore. He says, put on your new nature, put on your new clothes, be born again, come up out the water, and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. And in this is the key. This is the solution. Because Paul's like, you are a new creation. Live like it. Live like it. You had we kind of have this sin nature and a spirit nature. We're these dual natured things right now, you and I, where You've seen it in movies a lot where there's like an angel on your shoulder and a devil on your shoulder or something, and they're always at odds with each other. Every time you're trying to do something, you hear like this voice. It's like, yeah, you should do that. That's going to be fun. And then on the other shoulder, there's like, don't do it, man. It's not going to be good for you, right? And you're like, ugh. And you don't know what to do. That's what it's like to live on this planet. Like with the time we have on this physical earth, before we're in eternity forever, where we don't have that duality anymore, we don't have that internal conflict anymore. Until then, we're living in this dual-natured thing we got going on right now. But Paul's like, yo, don't believe the lies. Don't get catfished. Don't get suckered into your identity being found and rooted in anything other than Jesus. You got to know the truth. So you're like, well, how do we do that? And he says in the verse, he says, by becoming like him. Know your creator, know the truth, know where it's found, and become like him. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, it's by being in his word. It's by being in prayer. It's by being around his people. And listen, hear this. It's hard to mirror the creator when you spend all your time with catfish. You know what I'm saying? It's really hard because you become like, I heard this phrase recently. I don't know who said it, but it's like we are the average of the top 5 people that we spend the most time with. So who are those people? Is it catfish or is it your creator? Some mix of both. My encouragement to you is this week to spend some time with your creator. And YouVersion is a great place to start. Like, we make it easy for you guys. Like, and just the one time a day for 60 seconds can change your life. I mean, I swear, you don't believe me, but put it to the test. Put it to the test during this series. And if it doesn't work for you or you don't like it or your life just gets worse or something like that, then money back guarantee. But I'm not saying your life will improve if you spend time with Jesus. In fact, sometimes it gets worse, but you know at least the truth and where the source is. And you can be encouraged even whenever things aren't going well. It's amazing. There's something supernatural about God and his word. He's the only thing that won't let you down, that will never fail you no matter what. And also, by the way, whenever I say not to hang out with catfish, I'm not saying like just ditch all of your non-Christian friends and only hang out with the Jesus people. All right, I'm not saying like don't associate with people who don't be going to church and stuff like that. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But do you have the armor? Do you have the equipment on not to fall into that temptation when you do? You know yourself. You know yourself. You know what it's going to be like when you go to the parties or something, right? And how you're going to be. Do you have the discipline? Be honest. Or are you going to give in? I mean, think about it. Because look, I was just at Dua Lipa last night. I'm going to be at Chapel Roan tonight, okay? I've been at ACL. Like, I'm doing things, but like I'm not going to become like those things because I know the truth. I know what God says about me and I know who I am. It's not in question for me. I want to challenge you with something will be done. You get to influence those spaces, not the other way around. Go into the dark spaces and light them up with the love of Jesus. Be that one. Flip the catfish concept on its head. Be a catfish for Christ. That's what I'll say. I'm going to make shirts that say that and everything, dude. That sounds insane. But stabilize the spaces because your presence in them shifts the atmosphere. When you walk into a place, when you walk into a room, whenever you're engaging online, man, represent him when you do. That's my challenge to you. And then may you know and believe and receive what Jesus says about you. And may the truth set you free.